impact. But you know, I've been fighting the coal industry in West Virginia over the past 20 years. And last year I was in West Virginia for 6.5 weeks. I'm arguing a jury trial. And in the end, I won the biggest judgment in the history of the state, $500 million judgment. And I went back 3 weeks ago to argue the appeal, the defendant's appeal of that judgment before the West Virginia Supreme Court. But as I was leaving the state, I was driving on a federal highway, but the highway was, it was almost felt like I was driving on carpet. It was like the nicest highway that I've ever driven on. And I said to the driver in the car, I said, why does this highway feel just so perfect? And he said, because there's 22 inches of asphalt on this highway. Well, the Massachusetts Turnpike has 4 inches, and the Jersey Turnpike has between 4 and 6 inches. And every inch costs millions of dollars per mile. But it's not, and I knew why they had 22 inches, because that's what the coal trucks need. You know, but it's not the coal industry that's paying for those inches, it's you and me, the federal taxpayer. So when coal says to us, well, you know, we're the cheapest fuel because we can give you this fuel for 11 cents a kilowatt, they're not telling you that you're also paying elsewhere for the roads that they need throughout West Virginia and Kentucky to transport the coal. The reason we can't have high-speed rail in this country is because the coal gondolas are so heavy, they've warped all the rail tracks in our country. So it makes it dangerous to drive passenger trains fast on the railroads. Well, that's a cost to our nation. That's a tremendous cost to our nation. But you don't see that cost in the 11 cents a kilowatt hour when they say, oh, it's cheap. You don't see the cost of transportation. About a month ago, the federal government released a report that showed after testing 300 rivers, streams, and lakes and waterways in our country, thousands of fish, the federal government has concluded that every single freshwater fish in America is now contaminated with dangerous levels of mercury that are coming from coal-burning power plants. Today, according to CDC, there are 640,000 children born in our country every year who've been exposed to dangerous levels of mercury in their mother's wombs. And this is one of the costs of burning coal that you don't see when they say it only costs us 11 cents a kilowatt. You're not seeing the damage to our children's brains, and who can estimate the cost of that? The Harvard study there, which is the definitive study, that shows that ozone and particulate emissions from coal-burning power plants are today killing 60,000 Americans every year prematurely. 60,000 people dead. That's 20 times the number of people who were killed in the World Trade Center attack. But not just once, year after year after year after year. 1 million asthma attacks, 1 million lost work days from ozone and particulates just from the coal-burning power plants. Well, this is part of the cost of burning coal that they don't tell you about. When I flew out of West Virginia 3 weeks ago, I flew over the Cumberland Plateau between eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, which I've done many times over the years. And it gets worse every time. I saw something that if the American people could see it, there would be a revolution in this country. We are cutting down the Appalachian Mountains, literally, with these giant machines called drag lines, which are 22 stories high. They practically dispense with the need for human labor. And that indeed is the part. I flew under one of these machines in a Piper Cub. They cost $500 million for a single machine. And they get rid of human labor. And that's the point of them. When my father was fighting strip mining in Appalachia back in the 60s, and at that time it was tiny little cuts, you know, it was insignificant compared to today. But I remember a conversation I had with him when I was 14 years old, where he said to me, they're not just destroying the environment, they're permanently impoverishing these communities because there's no way that they can ever regenerate an economy from these barren landscapes that are left behind. And he said they're doing it so they can break the unions. And that's exactly what they did. When he told me that, there were 46,000 unionized mine workers in West Virginia digging coal out of tunnels in the ground. Today, there are fewer than 11,000 miners left in the state. Only 6,000 of them are unionized because the strip industry isn't. There's more people employed by Walmart today in West Virginia than there are by the coal industry. But they're taking more coal out of West Virginia than they were in 1968. But at least back then, at least some of that money was being left in the state for salaries and pensions and reinvestment in those communities. Today, virtually all of it goes straight up to Wall Street, to the corporate headquarters of Massey Coal and Peabody Coal and Arch Coal, and to the big banking houses like Morgan and Citibank and Bank of America, which own all these operations. 95% of the coal in West Virginia is owned by Wall Street operations. And they are liquidating the state for cash, literally, with these giant machines, these drag lines, and 2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate explosives they detonate in the state every day. It's the equivalent of a Hiroshima bomb once a week. They're blowing the tops off the mountains to get at the coal seams beneath. Then they take all the rock and debris and rubble and they scrape it into the adjacent river valley. And they bury the rivers and they flatten the landscapes. And they have already buried, according to EPA, 2,000 miles of America's rivers and streams. So we sued them. And we sued them in front of a conservative Republican federal judge, Judge Charles Hayden in West Virginia. And Judge Hayden said the same thing I said. He said it's all illegal, it's been illegal since day one. And he enjoyed all mountaintop mining. 2 days from when we got that decision, the lobbyists for Massey Coal and Peabody Coal met in the back door of Gail Norton's Interior Department. And Gail Norton is now under federal indictment. And they met with her first deputy chief, Stephen J. Griles, who is now serving a 10.5-month jail sentence in the federal penitentiary. And Griles was informed by too late, unfortunately, for the mountaintop. But there's nothing radical about the idea of clean air and clean water for our children. And we're not protecting the environment, as I said at the outset, for the sake of the fishes and the birds. We're protecting it for our own sake, because we recognize it's our life support system, it's the infrastructure of our communities. And this giant raft of hidden subsidies that is going to the incumbents has been the principal barrier for much more efficient forms of energy, local forms of energy, from entering the marketplace. Without those subsidies, they could not survive in the marketplace, because we, and by we I mean solar and wind and tidal and biofuels, we can outcompete them at every level on a fair playing field. They cannot compete with us without these giant subsidies that are going to those industries. And that's one of the, and if you look at every nation that has decarbonized its society, you will see a nation that has enjoyed instantaneous prosperity. Iceland in 1970 was the poorest country in Europe. It was 100% dependent on imported coal and oil. It used these huge surpluses that it has in geothermal energy to smelt the bauxite into aluminum. Then it sells the ingots on the world market, and that's its way of exporting energy. And even 6 months ago, before the crash, there were hundreds of multinational corporations lined up to move their headquarters and operations to Iceland to take advantage of the cheap, clean, green energy and abundant energy and the high quality of life that goes along with it. Sweden in 1996 decided to decarbonize its society and, incidentally, to shut down its nuclear power industry. It closed its two biggest nuke plants. It slapped a $150 ton tax on carbon. And again, you had thousands, tens of thousands of entrepreneurs, in the case of Sweden, rushing into that space to create new forms of energy from wind, from tidal, from solar, from geothermal, from putrid garbage and sawmill waste. And today, Sweden is the 6th richest country by GDP on Earth. Sweden's energy use has dropped 9% since 1996, and its economy has climbed 45%. Costa Rica decarbonized its electric grid. As a result of that choice, Costa Rica today is by far the wealthiest country in Central America. And those examples go on and on and on and on. But we have in our country far greater geothermal resources than they have in Iceland. We're number 2 in the world for geothermal. We have, my home in Mount Kisco, New York, is powered by geothermal. And virtually every home in New Jersey and New York outside of the major city centers could also be powered by geothermal. But it is a resource that is almost completely untapped. The wind and solar in the world, in our country, could power our entire nation from solar energy. We have